Grizzlies fans should listen to Klay Thompson, because Klay Thompson said the reason why we have this sort of disdain for them is because we see them in the rearview mirror.
So, Drew, just want to get your thoughts on John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. What was the experience like for them? Any kind of memorable stories? Just you mentioned just a pop-up shop for Josh's new shoe. What was your impressions in terms of kind of them being teammates and them experiencing the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a bigger deal for Jaren going into it because, let's be honest, we didn't expect Jaren to be in the All-Star game. And I think he's plenty deserving. I think he's been the best defensive player in basketball. It's just the defense usually does not translate to all-star appearances. So it was a little bit of a surprise, I thought, when he got selected. I think for him it was a lot of fun. I got the chance to see him like dancing in the lobby of the hotel, and there were fans outside looking in, cheering, going crazy. And so that was fun. He is a big fashion guy. He said it was the best he's ever dressed. He looked like a Yeti walking into the All-Star game.
I saw that, yeah.
He had at Saturday night, he was wearing pants that had a basketball hoop attached to them, and he said it was called his swish look. So he was living it up. He was having a lot of fun. Ja's team and his personal team and his crew is very large. So he didn't even stay in the Players Hotel. He had an Airbnb where they were all staying, and he was a little bit further detached. I think given sort of all of these stories that have followed him around, he's a little bit less – I don't know. He's a little bit less rambunctious, I guess, about this idea of being out there and putting – it reminds me tiny little bit maybe about like when Russell Westbrook started to get a little bit more quiet and a little less outspoken. I think he's worded it as I'm protecting my energy. So he wasn't quite he was still fun because he's John Morant. He's always fun. But it wasn't quite what it was last season, as flashy at the All-Star game. But he did have the pop-up shop, and the pop-up shop was awesome. Like, that was so cool. That it was a project Nike's been working on for months. The inside of it was completely made out of ice. They hired a local vendor to carve everything. There were all these really cool aspects about his childhood, and it was the first place you could buy the Ja 1 sneakers. And so as soon as people found out about it, instantly that became a very popular place in downtown Salt Lake City. So that was really cool. Like, the pop-up shop actually, I think, was probably the best part of All-Star Weekend for the Grizzlies. I mean, that was just such an awesome thing that Nike did for him. And it's very clear, I think, maybe it's even intentional that he's out there taking the opening tip of the All-Star game in his brand new shoes that he's debuting. I think Nike won the weekend a little bit with that because this was clearly a big marketing opportunity for them, and they jumped on it.
So let's dive into the Grizzlies, Drew, and want to get your thoughts on just where the team is at right now. It seemed like there was this pivot about a month and a half, 2 months ago, where the Grizzlies went from sort of the national darlings in the NBA to oddly, John Morant makes some confident comments and they turn into heels in some people's minds. Can you just track for us, with you covering the team, where did that shift happen and what has that been like in Memphis?
It's interesting to me because I wonder how much of this is just social media related, and it's very easy to get, I think, lost in this idea that social media is real life. And young guys, and the Grizzlies have a lot of young guys, it's harder for them to see that. And especially since the Grizzlies have become the rival and sort of this anti-hero against the Golden State Warriors, who have the largest young fan base because of Steph Curry and because of all the championships that they've won, that it has become this let's crap on the Grizzlies sort of affair online. And this is what these Grizzlies players are seeing. I think on the surface, when you really think about it, I mean, some of the headlines I can understand may not be appealing, I guess, for Ja Morant. But on the surface, I think he's a very likable player, right? He's electrifying. Yeah. He's a superstar. He's clutch. He was awesome in the playoffs last year. He's only getting better still at this point. And so I don't know if I can truly get on board with the Grizzlies are the most hated team. I think that a lot of people enjoy watching the Memphis Grizzlies, but we get lost in sort of this online battle it seems to have launched here. But they definitely do lean into this a little bit. I mean, it does not help to have a guy like Dylan Brooks on your team that is very clearly, I mean, his nickname is Dylan the Villain. He leans into it. The guy knows exactly what his job is out there, and he is an agitator. And so, they've got the right guys to play heel, to play villain, and they do a little bit. I mean, they're making comments like that. But I just caution myself of thinking that online is real life reality and vice versa. Because I think sometimes it's really easy to get lost in some of that stuff.
As we inch closer to the playoffs, we've still got quite a few games between now and then. But, if I were to tell you, Drew, the Grizzlies are going to beat the Warriors in the playoffs, they're going to match up, they're going to win. What would you say, would you predict are like the advantages or things that have changed between last playoff run and this one that kind of gets them over the hill with that?
I think Jaren will have played a lot better in that series. If you were to tell me that, the guy that battled a lot of foul trouble in the playoffs, he still battles a lot of foul trouble in these national TV games. It's almost like either he gets overhyped or the game gets called a little bit tighter and things change a little bit. And so you hope that he can be a shot blocking force and not get a bunch of fouls in the playoffs. So you kind of have to start there. I think he's the most important player for the Grizzlies. And Ja will have to be amazing, of course, and Desmond Bane will have to make three-pointers because this is not a very good three-point shooting team. But I think where the Grizzlies have a distinct advantage, which they were able to use last year, is inside. I mean, their front court is pretty loaded. We talk about the lack of depth on the wing, but you've got Steven Adams, who's been terrific, maybe the second biggest impact defender as far as bigs go in the league behind Jaren Jackson Jr. It's why the Grizzlies have the number one defense. I guess it switches back and forth within that top three. They've been back and forth with Cleveland for the number one defense. But I think that they have a big advantage inside against the Warriors with Adams and with Jackson and with them both playing so well defensively. And then behind them, you bring in a guy like Santi Aldama, who hasn't played playoff minutes but has been great for them this season. Brandon Clark was great in the playoffs for the Grizzlies last year. And then even Xavier Tillman, we saw him hit a three-pointer in a game against the Warriors in the play-in that got the Grizzlies into the playoffs a few years ago. So they're loaded in the front court. They have to take advantage there. And they're going to have to play good three-point defense because the three-point discrepancy between those two teams is rather large. I think you have to worry about that if you're the Grizzlies. But if you can control tempo, if you can get in transition, if you can take advantage of your size inside and your talent level inside, I think that they would have a chance in that series for sure.
It's so interesting with the dynamic between those two teams. In some ways, I do wonder, do you feel like the national profile of the Grizzlies has been risen thanks to those Ja Morant comments and sort of creating a rare rivalry in the NBA, in the modern day NBA at least? Yeah,
I know. I 100% think that. Obviously, what Ja does on the court is one of one. He's the most electrifying guy out there every night. I feel so lucky to be sitting there close at these Grizzlies games and watch this guy dunk on people because it's unbelievable. Yeah. There's a reason why he's in the top 10 of jersey sales so quickly. But the comments that have gone back and forth with the Warriors, I think, have certainly raised the profile of the Grizzlies because now you have the most watched team in the NBA, the team with probably the biggest microscope on them, and they've developed a serious hatred for the Grizzlies that they put out there and seems to be pretty obvious. I wrote a column earlier this year after Christmas when Klay Thompson sort of went off about the Grizzlies, and I think the truth is, Grizzlies fans should listen to Klay Thompson because Klay Thompson said the reason why we have this sort of disdain for them is because we see them in the rearview mirror. We know this is the team that's coming after us. This is the team that's trying to knock us off the top of the mountain. And it's almost like the disrespect between the two teams is a level of actual respect because the Warriors are acknowledging those are the guys, those guys chasing us, those are the guys that are up next. And we've got to keep them down. And so when they have the chance, they'll knock the Grizzlies down a rung, especially like when they won on Christmas. But that's just the way that this rivalry goes. And I think I can imagine that it's going to continue over the next few years as well, so long as the Warriors are actually good. It's also interesting that the Grizzlies have the Warriors' first-round pick in 2024 because you wonder what that team will look like when Steph Curry's a few years older. Like, are they going to move on? Is Draymond still going to be on that team? Are they going to be able to stay healthy? Like, it would be interesting at least to see the Grizzlies holding a valuable Warriors pick in 2024 if something were to happen where this team was different. And it just kind of adds another layer to all this. It's a fascinating rivalry. It's one of the best, I think, in the NBA right now.